Welcome to episode 20 of Nervous Breakdowns with G. In this episode, I teach you how to get people to treat you the way you want to be treated. I talk about buttons, pigeons, rats, and M&Ms. Just stay with me, I'll explain it.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest edition of Nervous Breakdowns, a podcast where your questions about relationships, dating, personality, and mental health are answered by Gino Tramontelli. Gino's a nationally certified counselor with master's degrees in clinical and counseling psychology. And now, here's the man himself, Gino Tramontelli.
I'd like you to imagine for a moment, ladies and gentlemen, that somewhere in your home, in a prominent place, in a place that is very familiar to you, you return one day. This could be your home, your office, your place of employment. You return one day to find that in a very visible position on the wall, there has been installed a bright red button. The button has no labels. The button doesn't give an indication of what it does. And you have no idea who put it there. After being exposed to this button for several minutes, hours, days, whatever, curiosity gets the best of you. You ask around, nobody seems to know what it does. So you finally push it. You approach the button on the wall, you push it timidly, and a small slot opens below it. And from it comes one of your favorite treats, in my case, an M&M. But imagine that it's whatever it is that you like the most. You eat the M&M, tastes delicious. You press the button again, another single M&M comes out. And you soon learn that for each time you press this button, you're rewarded with a single treat. I want you to keep this button in mind. I'm going to use this button as an illustration, as a thought experiment, if you will, to describe a phenomenon that I encounter all the time in my place of employment, in my practice. Over and over again, I find clients that come to me and they ask me, Gino, my biggest problem, the thing that causes me the most depression, the most anxiety, is that the people in my life always treat me poorly. The people that I care about take advantage of me over and over again. They borrow money and never return it. My parents don't respect me as an adult. They treat me like a child. They intrude into my affairs. They're constantly bugging me and annoying me. My boyfriend took out a cell phone in my name, racked up the bill. He has no intention of paying me. This happens to me with every guy I date. What is this pattern? Why do people always feel the need to mistreat me? And what happens is I often suggest to them something that they don't like very much. And I suggest to them that at some point they have to take some responsibility for training people to treat them this way. I suggest to my clients that in some way they're teaching the people that mistreat them that it's okay to mistreat them. That they reward, not only do they train people that it's okay to mistreat them, but in some way they're rewarding the behavior. This almost always results in a pushback. No, that's impossible. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Why would I want somebody to treat me this way? And I correct them. I'm not suggesting that you want them to. I'm suggesting that there's something about your behavior that's telling that person that it's okay. Not that you want it. That's a completely different issue. I don't think that you want to be treated poorly. Nobody does, guys. Nobody likes to be treated poorly. But I do think that if you find people repeatedly and in a trend and in a pattern treat you the same way over and over again, you have to look at the common denominator, which is you. Now, for those of you who are listening who are in the field or counselors, a lot of this stuff is going to sound pretty basic, right? I mean, this is stuff that we talk about all the time in practice, looking at yourself, looking at the role you play in the interactions and how we can only take 50% of the blame for an interaction. Sure. But I think this bears talking about because very often people overlook it. People are treated poorly, they assume the victim role, and they don't understand that they have so much power in their situations, in their relationships, in their lives, so much power to shape the way people treat them. And it can be difficult at first, particularly if you're doing something without even knowing it that teaches people it's okay to treat you poorly. It's very difficult at first. But once again, we're going to be using this idea, this imaginary button on the wall that gives you an M&M, to describe how our behaviors influence the behaviors of others and make their behaviors more likely or less likely to happen. Now, that's the important thing. I'm not talking about manipulating others. I'm not talking about mind control or anything like that. But what I'm talking about is some of the most basic principles in psychology, things, ladies and gentlemen, that have been around since the 1930s and 40s. These are books that are written by very stern-looking individuals with horn-rimmed glasses and their hair greased to the side of their head. These are your classic, lab coat-wearing, old-timey scientists that are coming up with principles that we can apply today, principles that are almost 100 years old, that we can apply to influence the way people treat us by making their behaviors more or less likely to happen. And if you can understand these principles, you will have a far greater degree of control in your lives and a far greater degree of control over the way you're treated. In order for me to start this discussion, I do need to give you a little bit of history. So I'm going to spend about 5 minutes on this. I'll try to keep it interesting, but it's important to know because it's important to understand where these ideas are coming from. In the mid-1930s and into the 1940s and even into the 50s, there was a psychologist named B.F. Skinner. And he is the granddaddy of evidence-based empirical psychology. He came up with this idea that we can only observe what we can observe. That when we look at behavior, that's all that's important is the behaviors, the things that we can see and count and measure. That the things that go on inside, the subjective experiences of the individual we're studying, really mean nothing. Okay? So the school of thought was called behaviorism, not very creatively, it's behaviorism. But he even goes so far as to say that free will is an illusion, that essentially we are only the products of the things that reinforce us or punish us that make our behaviors more or less likely to happen. And he was very famous for coming up with something called the Skinner's box. Now, his big thing was experimenting on rats and experimenting on pigeons. And what he would do is take these animals and put them in a little box, and in the box would be some kind of a device, a button, a lever, etc., etc., etc. And what would happen is he would examine them. He'd put them in the box with this lever. The rat would bump into it, touch it, whatever, and a little pellet treat would come out. And he would examine how applying different conditions to this box would affect their behaviors. He'd sit there counting the number of times they would press the lever, the number of times they would do whatever behavior he was looking for, and make notes over time with, rat A, rat B, rat C, pigeon 1, 2, 3, etc., etc., etc. And what he did was he found that behavior is highly predictable. We can predict with almost 100% certainty that a certain factor will influence the rates of a behavior. If there's a behavior and we give the creature something it likes, it will do the behavior more. If there's a behavior and we give the creature something he doesn't like, it's going to do the behavior less. That's it. Rewards increase the likelihood of a behavior, and punishments decrease the likelihood of a behavior. Okay? Now, he even got more complex than that. He even started to look at other factors. For example, what if you apply a condition to the animal that it doesn't like? Like if you took the Skinner's box and you applied like a mild electric shock to the floor, right? Which it doesn't kill the rat, it doesn't hurt it, but it's painful. It doesn't like it. And when the rat presses the button, the shock goes away for 30 seconds. Okay, that's actually a reward. It's called a negative reward. You reward by taking away. Okay, you reward by taking away something it doesn't like. And he found that this also, it still counts as a reward. It increases, the rat presses the crap out of that button because it doesn't want to be shocked. The opposite is true. You could punish by taking away something it likes. We do this with children all the time, right? When our kids misbehave, we say, hey, no Game Boy for you, or no TV, no tablet, no iPad, whatever the kids are playing with these days. I have 2 kids. I should probably know this a little better. But what we do is we take things away. We say, you misbehave, I'm going to take away this privilege. And the idea is the kid does that behavior less often. By taking away a good thing, it's a negative punishment. Okay? You take away to make the behavior go less. All right? So I just want to be clear that these things, I mean, we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen, the 40s and 50s, they understood this stuff. Okay? This is not cutting edge psychology. It's B.F. Skinner is one of the first guys you learn about when you start learning about psychology, which is all the more reason why we should understand these principles when it comes to our interactions with other people. All right. Now, another critical piece of behaviorism is that a behavior does not continue if it's not getting reinforced in some way. Okay. For example, the rat that you put in that box with a little lever or button may press the lever once or twice by accident or by, fooling around with it. But if he's not getting a reward, that behavior is not going to happen very often. Indeed, Skinner found some really interesting stuff. He found that he could make the rats and pigeons superstitious. He would make them superstitious by giving them a reward at random times. And what would happen is the rat or the pigeon would repeat the behavior they had done right before that reward. So if, for example, the pigeon was standing and just happened to bob its head right before it got a pellet, again, no relation. Skinner just at the random time gave the pellet of food into the Skinner's box right as the pigeon did a movement. He would find that the pigeon would repeat the crap out of that movement. Like the pigeon seemed to think. Again, Skinner wouldn't use the word think because he didn't really care what they thought. But the pigeon would seem to think that the bobbing the head was what caused the reward to come out. And in fact, guys, we do this too, right? Don't you see it when people are athletes, for example, are famous for this? They wear a certain pair of socks. They go out and they play a great game. Right? The socks had nothing to do with their performance in the game, but they say, oh, these are my lucky socks. And so they repeat the behavior of putting on that particular pair of socks or that particular pair of underwear or whatever. Same thing with gambling. Gambling's a famous one for this. When people gamble, they hit money, they win. Whatever they did right before there, whether they had a lucky rabbit's foot or put in the coin a particular way, you'll see people doing all these rituals. The rituals are the result of this reinforcement of an unrelated thing. In gambling, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, there's not a lot you can do to influence the outcome. And we're going to talk more about gambling later because Skinner had a lot to say about that schedule of reinforcement, which, again, we'll come back to it. So, repeating my point, if a behavior doesn't get reinforced, it doesn't persist. So how can we apply this in our relationships? If a behavior doesn't get reinforced, it doesn't persist. Okay? It extinguishes. That's what we call it, extinction. A behavior that doesn't get reinforced goes extinct. It goes the way of the dodo. All right? So what does that tell us when people are doing the same behaviors to us over and over again? If people are treating us the same way over and over again, and we know that behaviors that don't get reinforced don't continue, then the logical conclusion is that somehow that behavior is getting reinforced. Okay? So how? Well, it would be impossible for me to examine every human interaction and figure out how, but I can give you some examples that may illustrate the point. My examples are as follows. Somebody comes up to you and asks you for money. You give them the money. Guess what? You just reinforced it. You just made the act of them asking you for money more likely to happen. Okay? And now what I'll hear is, no, but yeah, I gave them the money because I felt like I was obligated, but I told them they better not ask me for money again. Hey, here's a little thought experiment. Imagine, if you will, that you approach me and you ask me for $5. And this is hard for me to do over audio, but I want you to use your imagination here. As I'm reaching into my pocket and taking out $5 and placing it in your hand, I'm telling you, I can't believe you asked me for $5. The nerve. You got a lot of nerve asking me for $5. I'm never going to give you this money, and you better not bug me for this money, and just get out of my face. And you give him the $5. Okay? Now, the same scenario happens again, where you come up and ask me for the $5, and I tell you, sure, I'll give you the $5. No problem. Anytime you need $5, you come to me and you ask me. But I'm not giving you the $5. My behavior is that I'm not giving you the money. My hands are not going in my pocket. I'm telling you I'm going to give you the $5, but I'm not giving it to you. Okay? So if you're a person that needs $5, are you going to ask the version of me that tells you no, but sticks it in your hand? Or the version of me that tells you, sure, you can have the $5, but doesn't give it to you? Chances are you're going to ask the version of me that's going to give you the money, even though I'm giving you a hard time about it. And ladies and gentlemen, actions speak louder than words. Again, a cliche, for sure a cliche. This is a cliche of the tallest order, okay? But a true one, a cliche for a reason. Because the behavior is what's important here. And when our behavior and our words don't match, the words get disregarded, all right? Again, important to think about in our interactions with other people. Because if we find ourselves saying, you better not treat me like this, and I can't believe it, this is so disrespectful, and but at the same time, our behavior is demonstrating to the person that the behavior is not only okay, but it's going to benefit them in some way. Guess what? They're not going to pay attention to what you say. They're going to keep treating you the same way over and over again. So, when you have the person that comes up and asks you for money and you tell them no, but at the same time you're sticking the money in their hand, you're rewarding the behavior. You're making that behavior more likely to happen again. Okay? Think about that. And I'm going to beat this, this is a dead horse I'm going to beat throughout this podcast. Making behaviors more or less likely by rewarding it or not rewarding it. Okay? If you're interested in not having somebody bug you for money and you give them money, guess what? They're going to bug you again. Just like the button on the wall will continue to give me M&Ms as long as I push it, I will know that whenever I want an M&M, I'm going to push that button. Sounds simple. It sounds simple, and it is simple, but it's hard to apply. Okay? Because if now you're interested, I'm using the example of somebody asking you for money. But let's use my hypothetical example of the button on the wall. Okay, let's say that now I've been getting M&Ms whenever I want them. I press the button once, one M&M comes out. I press the button a second time, a second M&M comes out, and this goes on for months and months. I don't know where the M&Ms come from, but I just happen to know that whenever I'm in the mood for an M&M, I know where to go. I go to my button. Okay. One day I wake up, I get the craving for an M&M. I go to the button on the wall, I press it, no M&M comes out. How would the average human being respond to that? Okay, think about that for a minute. Think about a time when you've had a piece of electronics and you pushed the button and it didn't work. How did you respond? If you're like me, you didn't just say, oh, I guess that was good while it lasted and I won't press the button again. No. In fact, you'll probably press the button again. You'll probably press it 10 times in rapid succession. Bang, 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 bang. You'll probably try to press it harder. You'll jiggle it. You'll try to make it work. You'll try to get your reward to come out. This is something that Skinner realized with his rat experiment in the Skinner's box, is that when he stopped giving the reward after giving the reward for a long time, he actually saw, if you graphed it, a spike in the behaviors before it extinguished. So when he stopped giving the pellet, let's say the rat was pressing the button once a minute, he stopped giving the pellets, he might find that for the next 10 minutes, the rat's pressing it like 50 times a minute. Bang, 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 bang. He's trying to get the reward to come out before, after the spike, the behavior went away altogether. So before extinction, before the behavior disappears, you're going to see a spike in behavior. Now, why am I saying this? Okay, the reason I'm saying this is because in our interactions with other people, if we're interested in them stopping a particular behavior, we have to be aware of that tendency, of that quality of behaviorism, that when we stop rewarding the behavior, we're going to see an increase in the behavior in the short term before it goes away. Why is this important? Because I see this over and over again. I see my patients come in, my clients, they tell me, again, so-and-so, my son always bugs me for money. And we have long discussions about it. And they decide that I have a very similar discussion to this podcast with my clients in my office. And they decide that they're gonna, I understand it, I'm gonna stop rewarding the behavior, I'm gonna go home and stop giving them money, and the behavior is gonna go away. And what I have to do is say, hang on a second, here's what you're in for. What you're in for is that your kid, his behaviors are going to increase and intensify in the short term. So you got to be prepared for that, because the worst thing you can do when that happens is reward the behavior after you've tried to extinguish it. Okay? So this is what happens. They go home. The kid asks him, hey, Dad, Mom, give me $5. You know what, son? We've decided that we're not going to do that anymore. No more $5 for you. And they find that their kid freaks out. What do you mean no more $5? What are you talking about? Give me the $5. How can you treat me this way? They get mad. They scream. They cry. They try to ply the parents with guilt. The parents, in many cases, give in. They say, oh, just stop bugging me. Fine, here's the $5. Or, oh, you're making me feel bad. Here's the $5. And that is the nail in the coffin, ladies and gentlemen. Because what happens is, when you reward the behavior after it intensifies, what have you done? You've rewarded the intensifying of the behavior. So you've taught your child, or the person in your relationship, they've taught the person that's treating you poorly, that if you stop rewarding them and they treat you even more poorly, that the key for them to get what they want is to be even shittier to you. You have trained them to treat you even worse. Okay? So what happens is you have to weather the storm, because you have to be aware that when you give the reward, you're going to reward the behavior that immediately preceded it. If your kid screams at you for money and you say no, and then they hit you and then you give it, you've rewarded the hitting. Okay? You've made your situation worse. The key is, once you decide to extinguish the behavior, you have to be fully committed to it. Once you've decided to set a limit, the limit has to be ironclad. It has to always be present. Okay? This goes back to Skinner. Skinner did some more experiments. He looked at schedules of reinforcement. And what that means is, he started to tinker with the reinforcement of behavior. So instead of it being like the button on my wall, one press, one reward, he came up with, well, what if I just give the reward, every 10 presses? And so every 10th time you press it, you get the reward. And he would find that the rats would, when they wanted a treat, just like if I wanted the M&M, I would go to it, and I wouldn't press 10, evenly across the day in anticipation of the 10th one. I would go when I wanted it and bang out 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and get my reward. All right. So he would find that would cluster the behaviors close together. Just like with the rats. They would, when they wanted their treat, they'd, smash 10 out and then get their treat. Okay. He also decided, what if I applied it on time? So the rat would have to press the button, but I would only give the reward like every 10th minute. And he would find that he would train the rats to press the button more and more as the 10th minute was approaching. So just like my button on the wall, I'd go to it when I wanted an M&M, and I would realize that, I haven't gotten one in a while, so maybe I need to press it some more because it seems like it's about time for me to get an M&M. Okay? But what he found was the most reinforcing schedule of reinforcement was when he kind of just gave them randomly, where the rat would press the button once, maybe get a reward, maybe then the 10th time after that, maybe the 3rd time after that, maybe then the 20th time after that. He found that when he did it that way, randomly, that he got the highest rates of the desired behavior or the target behavior. So, pressing that button. What does that sound like to you guys? What does it sound like to approach, let's say, a machine and you know that it can give rewards, but you don't know how often or when. Does that sound familiar to you guys? Because I'm thinking of something very specific. I'm thinking of slot machines. All right. And don't be fooled, ladies and gentlemen. The people that develop slot machines and the people that run casinos are intimate with these theories, okay? Because what they do is they tell you, here's a slot machine, put some money into it, and start pressing buttons. And you may get a reward or you may not. Here's a spoiler for you guys. Over time, you're going to lose your money. All right, that's the reality of it. The mathematics will catch up to you. The statistics will catch up to you. You lose your money. What we're hoping for is to get lucky and win a few bucks and walk away. But casinos, those big, beautiful buildings are not built on the winnings of lucky people. They're built on the losings of unlucky people. But what happens when you're sitting at that slot machine? You keep pressing the button. Why? Because the next time might be the time. All right. The next time you press that button might be the time when you hit the jackpot. And again, especially now with the electronic slot machines, you've seen the way you put in. You're looking at your money. You put in $20. The first thing they do is they change it into credits, which kind of makes it not feel like real money anymore. So now you have 200 credits from that $20, and you're playing 7 or 8 at a time or whatever to get all the lines. Right. You press, you lose. You press, you lose. You press. Oh, you win back a little bit. Right. So you get that little reward. Okay. So I'm in it. You press, you lose. You press, you lose. You win back again. And if you had to graph it, it'd be like a steady decline downward with an occasional little spike up, which keeps you in the game. Right? Guys, this is Skinner stuff. This is basic psychology. So why am I bringing this up? Because when we deal with people in our lives, we have to be careful not to do the slot machine thing, because what we're doing is we're making our situation worse. When we're sitting there and the person that's bugging us for money, we give them the money after the 10th time they ask, and then after the 3rd time, and then after the 20th time. We are slot machining them. They're going to keep hitting us up because they're getting rewarded, and they're getting rewarded not just on a very rewarding schedule, but on the most rewarding schedule. They're getting rewarded in a way that makes them addicted, in a sense, to bugging you or treating you poorly. So what you have to do is if you're being treated in a way that makes you unhappy, and you are very interested in making that stop, you have to not only stop rewarding, but also stop rewarding permanently. Because the minute you reward again, the minute you reinforce that behavior, you run the risk of really locking it in a very severe way. Okay, so what are some ways that we reward? Of course, there's. Now I'm going to bring in another set of theories called applied behavior analysis. But there's basically 4 ways that we can reward. All right. The one is tangible. So it's a thing, right? Money is the most common example of that. I bug you for money. You give me the money. It's a thing I'm holding in my hand, and it feels good. If I need the money, I have it, and that's rewarding to me, right? The second way that we reward is with attention. And we do this with kids all the time. This is why you're supposed to ignore children that are tantruming, right? When a child tantrums because they want something or because they want your attention, it's very important to ignore it, because you don't want to reinforce that unhealthy behavior. You don't want to teach a kid that if they want your attention, the way to get it is to throw themselves on the floor and roll around and scream and make a scene, okay? So the way to do it is to ignore it. Now, it's difficult, guys, when you're in public and your kid is misbehaving. It's embarrassing, right? But what you have to understand is that if you then reward the misbehavior in public, you're making the misbehavior in public more likely to happen. So sometimes you got to tough it out. You just got to suffer through 1 or 2 bad tantrums in public, in the interest of teaching your child that if they want your attention, that there are way more healthy and more appropriate ways to ask for it. Another way that we reinforce is, like I mentioned earlier, a negative reinforcement. When we take away something that is, something that is unpleasant. And we call this in applied behavior analysis escape. We call it when for example, when we have a kid and we ask them to do something and they act out. Hey, can you go cut the grass, son? Hey, son, go cut the grass. No, I don't want to do it. You always bug me, make me cut the grass, right? And what we do is there are times when we let them out of it. We say, okay, fine, you don't have to cut the grass. I get it, right? But we're reinforcing that behavior. When you ask somebody to do things for you and they don't do it, it's kind of reinforcing, right? If they don't want to do a chore and you let them out of it, whatever behavior they did to get out of that chore, you're making that more likely to happen. We see this all the time in relationships and parenting, especially. A lot of this stuff goes to parenting, but in relationships in general. And the last one, guys, is the most difficult one, and that is something that you actually can't reward, you can't punish, because it's something called wow, I'm having a brain fart right now. It's internal. In other words, the person is rewarded internally by whatever the behavior is. For example, if you have somebody in your life that treats you poorly and they just really get off on treating you poorly, like that's its own reward. They're sadistic. They're a sadist. They like to make other people suffer, and that makes them feel good. In those scenarios, there's not a lot you can do. You can't, because you're not the one reinforcing it. The only thing that you could possibly do is not let them see that it bothers you. And we talk about this with kids that are getting bullied, right? Like when kids tease you in school, one of the best ways to make them stop is to just kind of ignore it, right? Because if they don't get a rise out of you, if they don't get the pleasure of seeing you affected by it, then it extinguishes, because they learn that they can probably move on to another kid and pick on them, and they'll cry or feel bad, right? So, you kind of have to think about the situations in your life that are bothering you, the interactions you have with people that you like or you don't like, and examine them closely. Examine them with the help of a counselor, for sure. If you have people in your life, for example, that constantly overstep their boundaries, what is it that you're doing with them? What are you doing with them that is making them think this is okay? One of the more difficult ones that we see are I see a lot of young adults in their late 20s, early 30s, and especially now when the economy is not so great, and so we're seeing a lot of college graduates who are having a hard time finding a job, and they're having to stay with their parents for later and later into their lives. Some of them eventually settle. They start to feel comfortable living with their parents, even in their 30s. And they come in and they say, look, my parents don't respect me as an adult. They don't respect my boundaries. They continue to treat me like a child. And I examine that with them, and I say, well, what is it about you that's making them think this is okay? Okay? Oh, my mom always treats me like a baby. Well, do you behave like a baby? What do you mean? Well, for example, do you do your own laundry? No, she always wants to do it. Okay. Do you pay any bills? No, I don't. I don't have a job. Okay. Do you clean up after yourself? Do you cook your own meals? Again, all these things that adults do, and inevitably they don't do them, right? And so the question that I end up asking is, okay, well, so you want to be treated like an adult, but in what way do you act like an adult, right? Do you teach your mother and father? Do you teach them that it's not okay to intrude into your space? Do you do things for yourself? Do you behave like a grown up? And inevitably, they have a hard time with, no, but they should just, and I should, and no, it's not like that. Okay. You're teaching your parents through your behavior like a grown child that they can treat you like one. Okay. And what do the parents get out of that? Why is that? Well, because the parents are anxious, right? They want to make sure their kids are doing okay. They maybe feel comfortable in that role of parenting the kid and don't want to, feel pushed out or feel rejected by their kid, and so they do it, and it leads to arguments. It leads to, well, what, I fight with them all the time. Okay, you fight with them. Again, the words are fighting, but the behavior is acceptance. The behavior is, okay, do my laundry. Okay, you can pay my bills. Right? Why? Because guess what, guys? It's comfortable to have somebody take care of you. Okay, and very often I see parents in the same situation. Oh, my son doesn't do anything around the house, and he doesn't do his own laundry, and blah, blah, blah. So, okay, So what's the solution? Let the laundry pile up. Let it get dirty. Let your kid see that at 35 years old, when he's down to his last pair of socks, he's either going to wear dirty stuff or he's going to start doing his own laundry, right? Again, examining the aspect of your behavior that reinforces another person's behavior is key to teaching people how to treat you. In your life, using my example of the button in the wall, you are not the person pressing the button. You are the button that's getting pressed. And whether or not you deliver a reward upon getting pressed is what determines how often you get pressed and how you get treated. Okay? If you only give rewards when people treat you in a way that is acceptable to you, again, if you're the button and you only give rewards when they press you very gently and nicely, then you're going to get pressed very gently and nicely all the time. If you only give rewards when they bop you with a closed fist hard, bop, then you're going to have that behavior a lot. Right? You have the power to control the way people treat you by reinforcing only the behaviors you like. When your kid is asking for your attention, you can reinforce it when they're tantruming and throwing themselves on the floor, or you can reinforce it when they ask you in an appropriate way. Hey, Mom, hey, Dad, can you spend some time with me? Yes, I will spend time with you because you asked well. Okay, guys? So, using the button on the wall and the rat in the box, I hope that I've given you some insight into how we influence the way we're treated by others. And I hope that you can apply this and again, it's simple, but it's difficult. All right. This is one of the big things I always try to impress upon people. This is simple. The concept is easy. Your behaviors make up other people's behaviors more or less likely to happen. You reward a behavior, it's going to happen more. You punish it, it happens less. But it's difficult. It's difficult to change the pattern of someone that has been engaged in a behavior with you for years and years, because when you stop rewarding it, their behaviors are going to intensify in the short term. And you just have to weather it. Okay? You have to just have faith in the theory and weather it and understand that on the other end of that is going to be a person that's going to treat you differently, or they're not going to be in your life at all, which again is a potential consequence. If you have somebody and the only thing they get from you is they use you for things and they stop being able to use you for things, they're probably not going to be in your lives anymore. But guess what, guys? That's not a bad thing. That might be the best thing that ever happened to you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to my rant about rats and boxes and buttons and M&Ms and the way we are treated by other people. I hope this has been helpful. I want to give you my resources as usual. You can follow me on Twitter. I would appreciate the follows at Breakdowns with G. I have the Tumblr page where I upload all my videos and give you links and such. breakdownswithg.tumblr.com. That's right. And you can email me your questions. You can email me your comments, anything you want to know. breakdownswithg@gmail.com. If you're interested in mental health treatment, this is a nationwide website, samhsa.gov, samhsa.gov. It's a great starting point for any mental health needs that you have. There's a lot of literature on there. There's information. There are resources for community mental health in your neighborhood. You can also call your insurance company on the back of your insurance card. In most cases, you have a specific mental health number, and they will gladly tell you who accepts your insurance in your neighborhood. If you're in Central Jersey and you want to come out to the practice where I work, it's a wonderful private practice. They accept most insurances. It's in South Plainfield. You can visit the website at bewellnj.com. That's BEWELLNJ.com. Wonderful private practice. You can get treated for just about anything there. And that'll do it, guys. So thank you so much. And please share this with a friend. If you're still listening and you want to help me out, you can go vote for my podcast on podcastland.com. It's a little contest. You can only win once a year. I have not won yet. I came in second last month. So if you could vote for me on there, it would really help me out a lot. It improves my listenership. So thanks a lot, guys. And see you next time.